Sometimes the hardest thing about losing someone you love isn't the grief itself. It's learning how to live again after the world stops. For 72-year-old Gordon Ashfield, that world had ended 6 months ago when Ruth, his wife of 43 years, quietly slipped away in her sleep. Since then, mornings had become hollow echoes of routine. Black coffee for one, a quiet house that felt like a museum to a life already over. Her glasses still sat on the nightstand. Her favorite mug waited in the cabinet like it knew she'd be back. And every day Gordon passed the old Keller farm on his drive to town, a decaying shell that time had abandoned. Until one morning in September he stopped. No reason, no plan, just instinct. The for sale sign leaned tiredly into the wind, its paint chipped, its letters fading like the memories of the man who'd hammered it there. The farmhouse sagged under years of neglect. Its barn slumped like a wounded animal. Everyone in Millersfield said it was a waste of land and lumber. But as Gordon stepped from his truck, the air thick with dust and silence, something stirred deep inside him. Not hope exactly, but something close. Later that week he made the call, wrote the check, and by Friday, the old Keller property, and whatever secrets it held, belonged to him. When his son Derek found out, the silence on the phone stretched so long Gordon thought the call had dropped. "You bought what?" Derek had asked, his voice tight, controlled, the way corporate people speak when emotion threatens to show. "A farm, mostly land," Gordon said. "I need something to work on." Derek didn't understand. Nobody did. To them it was madness, a grieving old man pouring his savings into rot and rust. But to Gordon it felt like a way to breathe again. He saw potential where others saw decay, something worth rebuilding, even if it was just a distraction from the loneliness pressing at his chest. When Derek arrived that weekend, dressed like an architect visiting a demolition site, his first words were blunt. "It's worse than I remembered." But when Gordon showed him what he'd found, an old journal hidden in the rafters of the barn, wrapped in oilcloth and filled with careful, slanted handwriting, Derek's skepticism softened. The name on the inside cover read Samuel Keller, 1932. The entries spoke of secret commissions, hidden mechanisms, and treasures that must endure beyond sight. That night, as the two men sat under the flicker of a lantern, Gordon read aloud the words that would change both their lives. Not all treasures shine. Not all value is visible. Over the next weeks, father and son worked side by side. Awkwardly at first, two men out of practice at conversation. The barn creaked like it resented being disturbed, but beneath the decay, something called to them. When Derek's crowbar struck metal under the floorboards, the sound rang through the air like a bell. Buried beneath the dust was a forged iron key, intricate, ornate, unmistakably handcrafted. It gleamed faintly even after decades underground. "Samuel Keller made this," Gordon whispered. They searched the barn for what it might unlock, but found nothing. Then in Keller's journal, a cryptic entry appeared. "What's buried isn't always beneath. The foundation of what I built is not where men expect to find foundations." Derek dismissed it as metaphor, but Gordon felt the weight of meaning in every word. The mystery began to pull them together, a shared purpose bridging years of silence and regret. For the first time in a long time, Gordon wasn't just surviving the day. He was living in it. And Derek, the man who'd built walls of success around his emptiness, found himself returning each weekend, the pull of something real replacing the hollow urgency of his office life. 3 weeks into the renovation, progress gave way to revelation. A wall in the old root cellar hid stones newer than the rest, their mortar lighter, their symmetry too deliberate. Behind them lay a photograph sealed in wax paper, a man standing proudly beside an ornate iron gate, its pattern identical to the scrollwork on their key. On the back in faded pencil the words "Commission completed May 1935, the finest work of my hands." It wasn't just a blacksmith's pride. It was a signature, a clue left for whoever came next. When Derek and Gordon uncovered a buried box weeks later, heavy, ornate, locked tight, the air between them crackled with anticipation. The key fit perfectly. The mechanism turned, and the lid lifted to reveal nothing, empty, Pride opened decades earlier. The disappointment hit hard. For Derek, it confirmed logic. For Gordon, it deepened conviction. Someone had taken the treasure, yes, but something remained. Hidden deeper. Waiting. The kind of truth you can't bury with time. That night, under the hiss of the lantern, Gordon reread the journal and found a line that stopped him cold. The treasure is not what you find, but whom you trust enough to share the finding with. For the first time, Gordon realized this wasn't just Samuel Keller's story. It was his. Then came the discovery that changed everything. Using Keller's riddles, Derek traced measurements across the barn, 20 paces south, 10 west. Beneath a patch of untouched earth, ground-penetrating radar revealed what no one had known for 80 years. A hidden structure. Concrete, reinforced, deliberate, an underground vault. They brought in a small excavator, careful not to collapse the old ground. As the bucket scraped against metal, the shape emerged. A stairway descending into the earth, ending at a steel door engraved with Keller's signature scrollwork. When Gordon inserted the key, the mechanism turned with a satisfying click. 3 precise rotations, as if time itself had been waiting for his hand. The door opened, air rushing out stale and ancient. Inside lay rows of crates and sealed boxes untouched for decades. The first they opened bore the initials RH 1935. Inside, silver candlesticks, coins, heirlooms wrapped in cloth. In that breathless silence, Derek whispered, "It's real." And for Gordon, the weight of loss, loneliness, and longing for meaning finally lifted. They hadn't found gold. They'd found trust. A legacy of faith preserved through time by a man who'd believed in doing what was right, even when nobody was watching. As they cataloged each crate, the truth unfolded like pages in a forgotten book. The vault wasn't filled with stolen riches. It was a safe, a promise. During the Great Depression, Samuel Keller had been entrusted by desperate families to guard their treasures when banks failed and hope collapsed. He'd kept them secure beneath his forge, meaning to return them once the world steadied. But he died before he could. His final journal entry confessed his regret. "I have failed them. I cannot return what I swore to protect. I can only hope someone worthy will find this and do what I could not." Gordon read those words aloud, his voice trembling. Derek looked at him across the dim light and said, "Then that's our job now." What began as a renovation had become redemption. Over the next months, they traced names, followed genealogies, returned heirlooms to the descendants of families who thought their history had been lost forever. Each reunion was a resurrection, tears, laughter, gratitude. And in those moments, Gordon saw the one thing he thought he'd never see again, purpose shining through his son's eyes. Not everyone saw virtue in what they were doing. A wealthy dealer offered to buy everything for cash. No questions asked, no waiting, no lawyers. The temptation was real, but Gordon refused. "Some things," he said, "aren't for sale." Derek stood beside him this time, not out of duty, but conviction. When the first family arrived, a silver-haired woman who held her great-grandfather's pocket watch and wept because it still ticked after 80 years, Gordon understood that Samuel Keller's real treasure wasn't locked in crates or coins. It was integrity, the kind that outlives the man who carries it. Word spread. Newspapers ran the story. The town that once called him crazy now called him a hero. The farm came back to life, from repaired, restored, reborn, a monument not to wealth but to honesty, craftsmanship, and legacy. And amid the applause and attention, Gordon realized something simple yet profound. The farm hadn't just given him something to fix. It had given him someone to fix things with. When winter came, the barn was no longer a ruin. It was a museum of honor. Samuel Keller's forge rebuilt, his tools displayed, his story told. Derek had moved nearby, trading boardrooms for blueprints, spreadsheets for sawdust. Together, they transformed decay into legacy. And one morning, as sunlight streamed through the restored windows, a letter arrived from Colorado. It was from a woman named Virginia, Samuel Keller's granddaughter. She'd seen their story on the news, and she wrote to thank them for honoring the grandfather she never met. She told them how Samuel's work had supported her family for generations, how his letters spoke of duty, sacrifice, and love he could never fully explain. He wasn't protecting gold, she wrote. He was protecting people. Gordon read that line 3 times, feeling something settle deep in his chest, a peace he hadn't known in years. Months later, at the farm's Heritage Festival, the museum opened to the public. The town mayor spoke about integrity and legacy, but Gordon's words at the ceremony silenced the crowd. Samuel Keller taught me that true wealth isn't what you keep, he said. It's what you give back. And because of him, I didn't just restore a farm. I restored a family. Derek stood beside him, no longer the distant man chasing deadlines, but the son who'd finally come home. The applause didn't matter. What mattered was Ruth would have been proud. What mattered was that in a world obsessed with profit, 2 men had chosen principle and found something richer than money could buy. And so the story of the old Keller farm became something more than local legend. It became proof that integrity survives, that time may bury truth, but it never destroys it. The vault they'd uncovered wasn't just filled with heirlooms. It held every unspoken promise, every chance missed, every lesson learned too late. And when Gordon locked the museum each night, he'd whisper the same words to the shadows. We found it, Samuel. We kept your word. Sometimes the greatest treasures aren't buried in the ground. They're found in forgiveness, in second chances, in the quiet moment when 2 lives separated by pride and years finally meet again. And if this story touched you, share it. Not for views, but for the reminder that doing the right thing still matters. That some promises outlive time itself. 'Cause sometimes, the real treasure is simply finding your way back home.